Welcome to this podcast called Curious About Recovery. I am Kirsten Honeyball. I am your host. And in this podcast, I'll be diving deep into eating disorders, which are complex and challenging to navigate. So whether you're a sufferer, a professional, a family or loved one of a sufferer, you can join me as I get curious by interviewing professionals, chatting to eating disorder survivors, and sharing my personal experience with an eating disorder so that you can better understand various perspectives, remove stigma, hear inspiring testimonies, and simply get curious about all things eating disorder related. I would like to put out a trigger warning. These episodes explore the topic of eating disorders, and some content may be triggering to listeners. Topics explored may mention, but are not limited to, trauma, diets, food and body types, suicide, mental illness, substance use, self-harm, violence, gender identification topics, and more. Please take care before listening to any episodes. It's important to note that this podcast is not aimed to diagnose, treat, or cure any form of mental illness and should not be seen as a replacement for treatment of eating disorders. Everything said here is expressed in relation to personal and professional opinions, and listeners should be encouraged to view these episodes as an open-minded exploration of various possibilities and perspective rather than hard facts and solutions. Please take what applies or resonates with you and leave the rest. And if you're struggling with an eating disorder, don't hesitate to reach out to me at kirsten@kirstenhoneyball.co.za.
So today we have Maya Naumann with us on the show. It's so wonderful to have a fellow South African here just joining me, because a lot of the people I interview are professionals that are abroad, and there's not a lot of eating disorder professionals in South Africa at the moment. So it's just really lovely to be connecting that way. Maya is qualified with a BSc Medical Honours in Dietetics. She obtained that from Stellenbosch University in 2000. Nevertheless, she left university with a painful, shameful, very secret borderline eating disorder, and that those that are not enjoying it, feeding themselves and their children because of the negative stories in their heads, are being robbed. She now helps people realize that they do not have to be at war with their bodies to be healthy. So thank you so much for being here with me on the show. It's wonderful to have you, and let's dive right in. I know I have given you a little bit of an introduction, but you can just let me know, your story, how it is you got here, and a little bit about the work that you do.
I think you've given a good, just a brief summary of my story, but I can tell a little bit more. So what I'm doing currently is I'm working in private practice, and I work exclusively with people that have eating disorders and that have disordered eating. So that's really men and women for whom eating has become a curse. If it's a burden, it's something that occupies their minds. They don't feel successful at it, and it's a constant worry for them. Instead of being the blessing and the gift that I think it's supposed to be. So how I got here, I went to study dietetics 25 years ago. It really is a long time, because I had some issues with my own weight, and I thought, if I knew enough about food, if I had enough knowledge about how the body works, and if I understood, if I learned the tricks of the trade about what to eat and about what not to eat, then I could always be skinny and beautiful. And of course, if I could, if I had a university degree in nutrition, it would set me up to navigate my way around the dieting world in a good way. Because, there were so many different opinions. If you had a bunch of women together at a tea party, there was this one saying this and this one saying that. So I thought, okay, let me go find out what the answer is for all of you, and I'll make a career out of it so I can educate everybody and myself. So I did learn. I learned about metabolism and about calories and about weight regulation, and how to put together lovely meal plans that allow people to eat just the right amount of food to maintain their weight or lose or gain weight. And the formula seemed really simple. But the problem was that I couldn't do it. I found myself fluctuating between periods of being sensible and following a very nutritious, healthy eating plan, very controlled eating, and then flipping right over to out of control overeating. I would make up for it. I'd compensate the next day by going on the next diet, by restricting more, by over-exercising. And eventually this pattern of kind of being very in control and being out of control progressed to binging and purging. Being a registered dietitian, I knew what the diagnostic criteria was for an eating disorder, and I never quite qualified for bulimia nervosa, because in the criteria you have to binge and purge at least once a week consecutively for 3 months in a row. And for me, it was, I had good periods and then I had bad periods. So I actually didn't identify it as a real problem for me. I thought, it was a bit embarrassing and it wasn't great, but I wasn't really concerned about it. Nobody knew, not a single person knew that I occasionally binged and purged. It was a very secret thing for me. What happened then in the midst of all of this? I'm working, I'm seeing clients, I'm giving them diet plans, and I'm encouraging them. And in the meantime, I'm really trying to do the same thing as I'm giving to them, and I'm seeing similar patterns with my clients. They keep it up, they do really well, sometimes for a couple of weeks, couple of months in a row, but eventually they all fall off the wagon and they gain back what they lost. Then in the midst of all of this, to stay registered as a dietitian, one has to earn CPD points. So it's continuous professional development points. Just to keep up with research, you have to do a few of these every year. And there was a company that was offering different courses. And I read through the menu of what they had. And one of the courses was called Non-Diet Weight Management. And I looked at the title of this course and I thought, it makes no sense to me. I've got no idea what this could possibly be about. So let's try. Let's see what they can, what they're going to tell me. I thought it was maybe about exercise because that was the only other tool, it wasn't going to be diet. So then I got this course by a Canadian woman called Linda Amachinsky. And in it, they described what a dieter was and what a non-dieter was. So there were these bullet points. The dieter was, if the way they think, it seems as though I'm always on a diet. I lose weight only to gain it again. I'm preoccupied with a desire to be thinner. I feel guilty when I eat illegal foods. I have a closet full of clothes in different sizes. I've lost touch with my natural hunger signals. I fluctuate between periods of sensible, nutritious eating and out of control eating. I think about burning kilojoules when I exercise, and I'm at war with my body. I read these points and I thought, yeah, that's me. But it's not only me, it's all my clients as well. And it's most of the women that I know. If we speak about it, this is, what dieting culture teaches us, that it is a constant war. You have to be vigilant. You have to really watch what you eat. You have to quite intentionally manage your weight by not eating too much and by compensating with exercise afterwards, if you did. It's like a calculation that you have to keep making, and you have to keep being in control of. So the course goes on to describe what a non-dieter is. And that's somebody that says no to all of those points. I'm not always on diet. My weight doesn't fluctuate. I'm not preoccupied with the desire to be thinner. I don't feel guilty when I eat illegal food. So just the exact opposite of what these points are. And I thought, is it possible? Are there really people that are like this? And it, like I said, it intrigued me, and I started reading more. All the authors that were quoted in this course, I went and read their books and, did their courses and found out more. And I really got catapulted into a completely new world with a new way of thinking about food and about, what is healthy? How do we regulate our eating? So that was my intro into the non-diet world. And where my healing journey began from my own eating disorder, which I only really recognized in retrospect as being what it was.
It's so interesting that you mentioned this desire to learn about nutrition, academic way, in order to obtain some kind of control over one's own self. And I see that happening so often. You'll have people who struggle with their food and body relationship who then go into personal training or nutrition or health coaches and all of that. And that must have been a really challenging space for you to be when you were advising people on something that you'd learned academically, and then not only recognizing that it wasn't working for your clients, but then also going, but this is what I'm experiencing. And I can only imagine there must have been a whole world of conflict inside of you going like, well, how can I trust what I'm giving to my clients if it doesn't apply to me at the same time, So this idea of what we are taught about diets and the way that we should be or the way that we should eat or the way that, speaks into this broader spectrum of diet culture. So my question is you might have touched on this already a little bit, but what is your experience with with diet culture been? Specifically, I would think from an educational point of view, where maybe there's gaps in what we're teaching in dietetics and all of that. Or is it only the human perspective that then takes it to the extreme and uses it as coping mechanisms, everything? I don't know if you have any thoughts around that.
It's an interesting question because not everybody that sat in my dietetics class developed an eating disorder. Some of them came and they learned the information about food and they just carried on as normal and, weren't susceptible to that way of thinking. But I think the danger with the way education is taught and nutrition is taught is that they use what we call the biomedical model. So it's looking at the body as a machine and finding, what kind of ingredients does this machine need to function optimally. So you reduce it to, this is the liver and this is the heart and this is the skin and these are the nutrients that you need in order for that to do well. And you come with a very mechanistic model. And in that model, I remember often thinking to myself, what was God thinking? It would have been so much simpler if he had just made a little pill that we could take every now and then, no choices made, no nothing. And this would just have everything that we need and we eat it and there we go. but that's where the mechanistic model loses the whole, like the humanity of eating and of how it's part of our cultures, how it's a gift. If you think of the design, at university, we may have touched on it. If we did, I missed it. But the way a body is designed to deal with food is we know instinctively that we need to eat because we have a sensation in our body that cues us to look for food. We experience hunger. And hunger is an uncomfortable feeling. And to make that uncomfortable feeling go away, we automatically search for food. We eat. It gives us pleasure. It's rewarding. It's a wonderful thing. And then that uncomfortable feeling goes away. So it's really like double rewarding. You can, it's like you have an itch and you can scratch it and the scratching that you do is good for you. It's needed and it makes the feeling become positive. So I think that the way nutrition is taught, it's all about what we must eat and it doesn't address how we must eat. And how do you decide when you're going to eat? How do you decide how much you're going to eat? Is there a way of doing that in a natural way that doesn't need brain knowledge? This knowledge about food is, it's interesting, but you can eat well without it. If you took a bunch of 2-year-olds and, studies have been done on this and you expose them to a table with a wide variety of food, they tend to eat quite a balanced diet. They don't just eat sweets because too much sweet is aversive to your taste buds after a while. There's a sense where you become satisfied, but all of that kind of the natural regulation is lost when you become mechanical about your eating. And the term we use is we speak about external regulation. So regulating your eating, not with your body, but with your mind. And you start doing that the first time, somebody goes on a diet. That's when they say, okay, from here on, the feedback I get from my body around what I need, what I want, how much feels good to me is not relevant anymore because I'm going to follow the diet that's been prescribed to me. Yeah, so that say becomes a mechanical mind thing, and you lose that connection. I say that dieting breaks something in you, and what it does is it breaks your trust in yourself. It breaks your ability to have that very intuitive relationship that exists between the body and the mind. If the thinking part takes over, it shuts out the feeling part. So it's moving the control center around eating to your mind and not in your body where it's meant to be. To use an analogy, I can say, if you're driving a car, you can be driving along and you can go to university and you can learn how that car functions. You can learn about how an engine works and how it burns fuel and how the different variables have an impact on how much fuel is burnt, like how fast the car is driving or what load it's carrying. And you can make calculations. You can have a sheet of paper and you can work out exactly if this car has done this, it needs 10 liters of petrol, and you can go fill up with your 10 liters. But people don't drive that way, because if you had to drive that way, you would be totally preoccupied with your calculation. You'd have to be figuring out the whole time, how much fuel does my car use? How much fuel does my car use? We don't drive that way. And the thing that allows us to not drive that way and to just enjoy the journey and focus on, what we're seeing is a petrol gauge. It's very simple. It has a kind of an internal sensor that figures out when the tank is empty, the light goes on, and then I need to fill up. It's as simple as that. And with the body, it can be that simple too.
I absolutely love your analogy of having an indicator that says, "Hey, I'm full now," or "I'm empty now," and it's a wonderful analogy. And when you spoke about, what did God get wrong? Can't we just have a little pill? I've often said to my friends, can't we just photosynthesize like plants? Just go spend some time in the sun. Generator. But you're exactly right. It takes out the human element, and also looking at ourselves. And yes, there's certain nutrients that would create an optimally thriving body. But if you're stuck in the calculations and the obsession around it, you're not really living, and you're not really using that internal gauge. I recently had a doctor say to me that I'm experiencing leaky gut, which is something that I always navigate through, unfortunately, because of the damage that's been done to my system. But they were like, okay, cool, now you can't have this, now you can't have this, now you can't have this, now you can't have this. And I know for myself that I can't zero tolerance and take all of those things out, because my mental state will kick in, and I'll start using it as an obsession, as a way to be like, am I eating perfectly right now for whatever, and so it makes me think of this human perspective of eating. It's almost like this intuitive gauge that says yes, no, this, that. But an interesting thing that often comes into play, and I hear a lot of people speak about this, is they say, well, if I just listened to my body about what I wanted, then I would just be eating like whatever, I wouldn't be eating anything of any nutrient value. I'd just be eating takeout all the time, and I'd just be, and so because when I say my thoughts are, well, if you're wanting to eat takeout for every single meal, you're probably not intuitively connecting with your body's nutritional needs. But I could be wrong. So what is your take on this, especially for a person who's struggling with disordered eating, who's now reestablishing that connection to, maybe they don't know how to tell what their body's saying, what they need. So how do you help people navigate that?
So I mean, that's absolutely valid. Where people say, well, if you just let me eat what I want, I would eat junk all the time. So it goes back to, again, what is the dieting mindset? What has dieting taught us? And what are the consequences of having followed diets in the past? What do we end up with? And I've got a lovely study was done by psychologists in Canada, where they divided people into different groups, so that they had them fill out questionnaires to see whether they restrict, whether they are eaters that are, focused on counting calories, good foods, bad foods, whether they have that typical dieting mindset, and people that didn't have that. And to both groups, they gave a milkshake to drink. And they said, this is part of our study, you must drink the milkshake. Afterwards, they presented them with 4 bowls of ice cream of different flavors. And they said, you must please taste the ice cream and rate the flavor. How much do you like the ice cream? And this is where they started observing what the different behaviors were. This is where the study actually started. And they found vastly different behavior in the 2 groups. One group ate a lot of ice cream and the other group didn't eat much ice cream at all. Can you predict who would have done what?
I have thoughts, but I'm actually not sure. You go for it. Tell me.
Okay, so the dieters, the ones that restrict their eating, they ate a lot of ice cream and the other group didn't. So now we have to get into their minds. What is going on here? What is making this one group react so completely different to the other? So for a dieter, if they've just had a milkshake, what it's done is it's thrown them off their diet. They're no longer in control. Their day is no longer, they're not being good anymore. They've now kind of crossed the line and they've gone over into bad because they've had a food that is normally not allowed for them or in a quantity that they wouldn't allow themselves to have. So for them, they've kind of entered into a zone because they had this milkshake where forbidden foods are allowed. Ice cream is a forbidden food. I've got the opportunity to eat it now, so I'm going to. I'm making use of this opportunity because it's here. Where for a non-dieter, they've just had the milkshake. They're feeling quite satisfied. It's cold, it's sweet, their tummy's full. There's no drive to eat the ice cream because ice cream is not, they've got permission to eat ice cream today, and they also have permission to eat it tomorrow or the next day or the next day. It's not a once in a while thing that I'm going to have. And so a dieter has this thing with ice cream. I've got the opportunity now. Tomorrow, I'm going to go back onto my diet. I won't have ice cream tomorrow. I can't have ice cream tomorrow. It's not going to be available to me. So it makes complete sense to eat it now. The way that they make decisions is for the dieter, it happens here. It happens in their thoughts. I want the ice cream because I can have it. For a non-dieter, it happens in their body. I've had a milkshake. I'm feeling satisfied. I don't feel compelled to eat ice cream now, so I don't. For a dieter, if they don't learn to legalize all foods, to say, I can feel neutral about all foods, everything has a place, I'm allowed to choose everything, I have permission to choose any food, any day. If that permission is not there, if that unconditional permission is not there, the way they interact with a particular food is not normal. And they can't be intuitive about it. So for a long time, I always had somewhere in my horizon another diet. I knew at the end of summer, at the end of the week, maybe next year, when I'd reached a certain weight, at some point I would start restricting again if I had gone into a period of being more free with my eating. But it was always, short-lived. If I only have access to something, if I fear that it's going to be taken away from me at some point in the future by me, nobody else is going to take it away, but I'm going to restrict myself, then the way that I'm engaging with that food today is not normal, and it's not possible to be normal. So working with somebody that has that belief about how they will be with food requires dealing with their thoughts, their black and white thinking about food. They have to learn that there is no good food, there is no bad food, that all foods have a place.
And I suppose that speaks into people who have heavily restrictive diets, whether it's a mental restriction or physical restriction. And then, perhaps for someone like yourself and me, who would then follow through with these unpermissible foods within a binge and a purge or over exercise or something like that. So someone who is struggling with that kind of cycle, how do you teach, or what is your non-diet approach? What does it entail, and how do you guide someone along that way of eating and being?
It really requires kind of rethinking where that whole approach to food came from and what the alternative is. So one needs to kind of go layer by layer and see, in somebody's childhood, where did it come from? Who gave them the idea that you have to control what you eat? I'm working with a young girl now who told me that, I asked her, where did your first diet thought come from? And she said it was a nanny that used to look after her when she was a little girl, who every time she ate a toasted cheese sandwich said, oh, I shouldn't be eating it. It's going to make me fat. I shouldn't be eating the bread. And as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, she kind of heard this, I suppose, and it didn't really, make much sense. And I'm sure she didn't think about it much. But as a 13, 14, 15-year-old, where your body starts changing and you start becoming aware of, how fat phobic our society is and, how difficult that is, then those messages come back and they start playing in your head and you start thinking, I must not eat bread because that's what I heard then. So it's a bit of an exploration that one does with each person to see where does it come from. What was the culture in your home that you grew up in? What were the messages that you heard? What was it like in your school? What was it like in your town, in your country? What were you exposed to? What were the TV shows you were watching? Like all of that plays a role into it. So I guess the first point in dealing with somebody is you have to make them like literate of their history. They have to be able to see what diet culture is, what diet culture messages they have heard, and what have they internalized, and what are the beliefs they hold because of that. I mean, I can think of myself. I grew up in a home, we had normal eating patterns. There was no, I don't remember much dieting or restricting. It was, normal eating. But there definitely was a very negative view on people that were bigger. My dad would make disparaging comments. I mean, I definitely knew that being, in a bigger body was not okay. And then when I was about 16, a boy ran past me at school and he gave me a slap on the bum and he said, finally filling out, Maya. I look back at that and I think he probably meant it as a compliment. My body had changed from being, a skinny little girl into being a woman. And, women have more fat on their legs and on their bellies and on their, they've got breasts and they have bodies that can bear children. So it's entirely appropriate and normal and good and supposed to be for girls to gain a certain amount of fat between being, an adolescent or like, pre-puberty and after puberty. Now, this boy had made that comment to me and alarm bells were going off in my head. I knew that having fat on my body was not a good thing. I wasn't supposed to have fat on my body. And if I had some, then I needed to do something. And that very evening, I remember going to my mom and saying, I want to go on a diet. Can you help me? I need to lose weight. The thing in the culture is there.
It's just something that is very hard to break through. And until a person has become very self-aware in themselves and also in the way that they treat others beyond what they look like physically, it's one of those things that we're not going to see, I don't think, in the very near future. The world is very body obsessed, and so
absolutely. But that's that's the fight. That's the fight that we have to take on. We have to fight the diet culture and the absolutely misguided thing that's out there, that's on social media and in the general media and even in the doctor's rooms, that says there's something like healthy weight. For me to go, I remember this with this first diet that I went to, and this woman gave me, she looked at how tall I was, and she gave me a weight range, and she said, okay, you can choose what's going to be your goal weight. Do you want to be, at the low? So within the range, I could choose any number. So I could be at the lower end of the range or the higher end of the range. And the range was pretty big. I think there was like a 10 kilogram difference between the higher that was acceptable for them and the lower that was acceptable. So it's a bit like, saying to you that the way your body is up to you. You can decide what your body's going to look like. And it's just based on faulty science. When I am a baby in my mother's womb, my DNA is there. The blueprints for how I'm going to turn out are there. The width of my shoulders, the shape of my nose, whether I have a high hairline or a low one, whether my hair is going to be curly or not, whether my hips are wide or narrow. That's all coded. There's nothing I can do about any of that. But the only thing I can do is I can take very good care of myself and accept what comes out of that. And if we start paying attention to nature and, just really looking at creation, we see that there's diversity, and we should expect diversity in the human race as well. Some people have a very slim body, girls that you see in the magazines. There are those that are perfectly healthy, and that's just the way that they were made. And others have, the big majority are kind of in the middle somewhere. But then there are also some that are super healthy, exercising enough, eating really, really well, but that have larger bodies, that have more fat on their bodies, because that's the way that kind of their DNA has coded for them to be. And, our society is weightist. It makes such terrible judgments looking at people. If somebody has more fat on their body, they go like, oh, well, you obviously are not taking good care of yourself. And that's why you look that way. And, it is a difficult one, because it is possible through bad choices and poor lifestyle to shift your weight out of the range that it should be in. But the thing is that I cannot tell by looking at somebody whether they are at the right weight for them or not. I can only tell what is a healthy lifestyle, what is a healthy relationship with food, what does a good movement pattern look like. And then we need to kind of learn how to accept the outcome. And again, accept that there is going to be diversity. I really think that this the serenity prayer, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I think that's the thing that we need to apply to body sizes. We need to focus on what are the things that are in our control, and do them really well, and then accept the outcome. And it's going to take, more people to speak up about this and to say, we need to normalize size diversity. There's the Health at Every Size movement. It's got lots of advocates all over the world that are really trying to make a difference in how we view different sizes and shapes.
As a professional, it's almost, I feel like it's almost our responsibility to be teaching these things to people as professionals who acknowledge that a lot of the old mindset around food and the body has actually been quite flawed and captured in diet culture. Now, two things. The first one is just your opinion or your thoughts on what people are making, where the gaps that particularly dietetics in South Africa is around the treatment of eating disorders. Have you witnessed any of this? Yeah, what are your thoughts around those topics?
So I can't say that I have intimate knowledge of how others are treating their people. But I can say I'm a big fan of Dr. Anita Johnston. She works with eating disorders, and she's done a PhD, obviously. And she says that any treatment of eating disorders needs to cover 4 areas. The first area is this cultural literacy, learning, understanding what diet culture is, what the messages are given, seeing the flaws in the messages out there, on Instagram, starting to look with a critical eye at those things and understanding, the flaws in them. Again, a personal story. I remember seeing an advert once for a diet drink. And the before and after picture, the model that they'd used for the before picture was a normal weight woman, but she was wearing jeans, and there was a little bit of a roll over the jeans, which, women have. It wasn't, she was not a particularly big person. She was just completely normal. But so they used her as the before picture. And then the after picture was somebody, was her obviously, but, at a very low weight where she was like totally muscular and toned and there was no fat on her body. And I looked at it and I thought, oh my goodness, that before picture, that looks like me. Completely normal and at a normal healthy weight. But it kind of creates that idea in your head that I should be pushing lower and that I could be pushing lower, and that it's better to be lower. Those messages, it's so easy to go wrong with those messages where you say, if fat is bad, thin is better, and very thin must be best. If sugar is a bad food, then eating less sugar is good, and eating no sugar at all, that must be the best. If food is dangerous, then I must eat less food. And you know what? If I can get away with not eating any, then I've won. Then I've done really well. So yeah, again, developing literacy around those messages and seeing who's behind them, what is the thought behind them. I think reading about feminism and about the patriarchy and about how women are being controlled and, all of that kind of education, I think is part of this cultural literacy that she speaks of. And then the second point she says is with eating disorders, they have to learn body literacy. It's interoceptive awareness, learning how to read your body, how to experience the signals. What does hunger feel like? What does fullness feel like? And how to respond to them, how to start valuing those signals, paying attention to them, trusting them, and interpreting them correctly. But there's a thing, if people have ignored their body signals for a long time, it's sometimes difficult to start hearing them again. And people sometimes say to me, but I never feel full, or I never feel hungry. And I say to them, you do. You're just not aware of it anymore. And it's like if you are in a busy restaurant and there's lots of people talking and, crockery and cutlery sounds. And then somebody says to you, oh, I love this song. And you think, what? I'm not even hearing music. Is there music playing? And then that person will go like, yes, this is a song. And they'll start singing along. And then suddenly you hear it. It's as if they drag your ear up to the sound. And then you're like, oh, it's been here all along and I just didn't hear. So that kind of teaching needs to happen as well, where somebody needs to be made aware. What are the sensations? What are the feelings? How can you learn to feel them again and to listen to the music of your body? So that's the second point that must be addressed with any eating disorders. And then the third one is awareness of feelings, emotions, learning how to cope with them, how to deal with them. And that's also a very interesting point. So an unintended consequence of dieting is if you learn to disconnect from your physical sensations around hunger and fullness, it's as if you say to all the sensations that come from your body, I don't trust you anymore. I'm not going to listen to you anymore. I'm not quite sure what you mean. I'm going to live in my head only. And our emotions are also communicated through our bodies. And if we lose that connection, it's as if our internal compass becomes lost. And, women in the throes of eating disorders, they don't know what they like. They don't know what they want. They don't know what they feel. They're disconnected from all of that. And it starts with the food. And I don't know where it starts. It's for me, it's a chicken and egg thing. But it's a dissociating from what I feel that they learn. And then, having to bring all of that back to learn how to read your body from a physical aspect, but also from the emotions. To know, what does a knot in my shoulders mean? What is a butterflies in my tummy? Those kind of physical sensations that speak to us about, how we are feeling in a situation. Learning how to not run away when we feel. So that's the third one. And then the fourth point that Anita Johnston says is that we have to learn assertive communication. So that's learning, just ask to first of all, to identify what we want and what we need, and then asking for it and standing up for ourselves and doing that. So I think if there's eating disorder treatment that doesn't look at all four of those legs, then I'd say it is lacking something. And this is again where the team comes in, because a dietitian can't do all of that. That's why we work together with the psychologists. And I have found that my clients that I see that have done work with the psychologist, it's like they are primed to learn this kind of agency, to be able to take, control of their own feelings and sensations, and they run with it easily and quickly. Where the ones that haven't done their internal work, they struggle more.
It's an incredibly powerful 4 categories that are required for eating disorder recovery treatment. And I love that last one you also speak. It's about, I often teach my clients about being able to express oneself in authenticity, and, being able to hear oneself internally and then be able to vocalize that. And whether that's being assertive with someone or communicating with someone, or whether it's creative expression of oneself, it's such a vital element of the recovery process.
Absolutely.
Getting more than just your nutritional needs met is a critical element of our relationship to food in our body, and I guess by affect our relationship to ourselves. And you speak about, the fact that we as professionals need to educate people on the holistic approach, rather than getting stuck in any form of rigidity. And I know that you are involved with Non-Diet South Africa, Non-Diet SA. And I'd love to know a little bit more about this. Is it an organization? Is it a company? I'm not actually sure. You could tell me more.
What it basically is, it's a whole bunch of professionals that have come together and said, we all have seen the flaws in diet culture and in the way that people have been dealing with the nutrition education, and we want to do this differently. So we see our role as partly to educate the public. So we have Instagram accounts, and we have, we're on Facebook, and we try to, get into the media as much as possible, writing articles for magazines and newspapers and whatever, and speaking on the radio, just to get this message out that there's a different way to look at food and eating and the body. It's, I guess, advocacy and education that we try to do. And then secondly, we are trying to create a list of practitioners that people can go to if they want to know, if they want to be, treated by somebody that has the non-diet approach, that has the health at every size approach. I mean, we hear horrible stories from our clients that they go to a medical practitioner because they've got a sore knee. And the practitioner would look at them and go like, oh, well, you have to lose weight. No examination done, no questions asked, no nothing. That's the immediate assumption is that this is self-inflicted and you need to, if I at a normal weight go to a doctor and I say my knee is sore, then he goes, oh, we need to look at this. We need to see, what's happened here. That type of, I guess, prejudice that people experience in, from medical practitioners prevents them from going to seek medical attention when they need it because they worry that they're going to get judged and they're going to get told again that they need to go on diet, and then they don't get the care that they need. So we're trying to establish a network of people that have the health at every size model as their background.
How could a professional get on that list with you guys?
We have a Facebook group for professionals that one can just send a request to join. And there's also one for the public. And there's an Instagram group as well. And there's a WhatsApp group where we communicate with each other. But they can just find us on Facebook, send a message, and then we'll add them to the network.
That's awesome. So we're nearly coming toward the end of today's episode. So I wanted to find out what has been the, I guess, highlights of your personal career and what brings you joy and how do you manage your non-diet approach in your life?
The highlight is without a doubt being working with people and having them experience an aha moment, where that shift happens. And it's like, for me, the transition of being on diet all the time to being free is the only word I can use to describe this, is it's so massive. It's like you live with a heavy backpack on your shoulders the whole time. Like everything is difficult. Everything is hard. And to see somebody realize that they can put that thing down and be free is just incredibly rewarding. It's like I see people take their power back and they learn that they can trust themselves and they can make good decisions about feeding themselves and they can rely on their internal wisdom. So, I found that working with people in the eating realm, it often ricochets into all other areas of their life. When they start feeling, more powerful, if somebody takes back their intuitive wisdom and says, I've got this, it's, their creativity comes back, their dreams come back, their interests come back. They start to, become assertive and know what they want and they go for it. Where before it was all, the thoughts were so occupied with, how do I follow the rules and do what I'm supposed to be doing. Like there's no space for like that real person. So seeing that emergence is just wonderful. And who's that? Martha Beck speaks of the difference. She says on a diet, it's like you go from being a fat caterpillar to being a thin caterpillar. Like changing from a diet to non-dieting is like turning from a caterpillar into a butterfly. It's that big, the change.
I can definitely relate to that because I always had this feeling that there was this creative and assertive and like bold and I guess intuitive person within me. And every time I fell back into behaviors around the eating disorder, I would feel like I immediately put a wall in between my ability to be that person and my ability to not be that person. And it was almost like a motivating factor in my personal journey as well to say, well, I'm never going to be my best self if I keep doing this stuff, It's a beautiful highlight to highlight for yourself there because being a professional who kind of knows and is able to guide another person toward that aha moment is really rewarding. And for those people who are, really struggling with maybe being in a yo-yo diet or binge eating or just having a poor relationship to food in their body, what would you say to encourage people on their journey?
I'd say, you need to want more. You need to ask for more. You need to say, I deserve to have a satisfying life and for food to nourish me and for me to trust that my desires are good desires and that I wasn't made, I'm not a mistake. I can, there's a way for me to live that is going to be joyful and free, and I'm not going to stop until I find that. And again, something I can say is, therapy can be so extensive and it can be difficult to get to the right people. But I read my way out of an eating disorder to freedom. There are magnificent books. There is such wonderful material out there. And if people, you can have access to them. People have websites, they've got Instagram accounts. There's such good stuff out there that you need to go find it so that you can be free if you are not.
That's wonderful words of encouragement to say, just because you haven't been able to go to the conventional therapy route and all of that because you might be financially constrained, it doesn't mean that there isn't still resources and help and a place where you can find accessible resources in order to educate and move forward with your disordered eating recovery. So thank you for that message. It's actually the first time that anyone's ever said that specific message, and I quite enjoyed it. For people who are wanting to maybe touch base with you, learn about what it is you're working on, or just want to reach out to you from a dietetics point of view, how can we get hold of you?
So I have a website. It's got a contact page. It's just mayanaumann.com. So it's Maya and Naumann. I think that's the easiest way. I am based in Cape Town, in the city bowl.
Thank you so much for giving me your time today just to be on the show and chat to me about your non-diet approach and a little bit about your story. I'm absolutely certain that there are going to be people who find incredible value in this episode. Thank you so much, and it's been wonderful chatting to you.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. If you have liked it, share it with people who you think might benefit from listening to it as well. Don't forget to go to my Instagram page called @CuriousAboutRecovery to find out about upcoming episodes or to browse the episodes of the past. You can also follow my page called @KirstenHoneyBall, where you can get inspiration for your eating disorder recovery.